do put a gun to your head, it may not be visible, you can't see it, because they don't do it right away. But let's say you don't pay your taxes, or even part of your taxes. What do you think is going to happen? Do you think the government's just going to let it slide by? Oh, you don't have to pay these taxes. If you don't agree with these, you don't have to pay these taxes. Of course not. I mean, right away, they're not going to use a gun.
Hey, Credible2. Thank you once again for being so patient with the video response. I work a lot. Unlike a lot of people here, I work for a living. I also wanted to clear some things up. There's been a lot of comments on my video saying things like, go ahead and collect that money from the government, bitch, and stuff like that. For the record, I've never ever collected unemployment. I've never collected food stamps, nor has anyone in my family collected food stamps. I've never had any government assistance of any kind, including financial aid for college. So, yeah, I worked for every single penny of it, and my parents paid for some too, because I'm lucky enough to have parents who are financially able to pay for that. So for those people who think that I'm advocating, taxes because I want them to pay for the programs that I personally use, it's bull. I don't. And, just to clear that up, that assumption that somehow because I'm defending the tax system that I must be taking advantage of all these government programs, I'm really not. Although everybody in the United States, whether you admit it or not, does take advantage of programs that are paid for by taxes. And myself included, but I don't take advantage of the system whatsoever. I'm going to go through some of the things that you said in your video, and kind of comment on them, because I think, there's maybe a little bit of a communication problem that we have. You're seeing things one way and I'm seeing things the other. Anyway, I'm going to go ahead and do that.
I'm not going to put a gun to your head, but this is what happens. You, first you get a couple of notices. If you don't, pay these taxes and, pay taxes upon taxes with these notices, you have to go to court. And if you don't go to court, you get another notice with a bunch of, more, penalties on it and more taxes on it, etc. And if you don't pay these, police are going to come and get you. And they're going to try to get you to jail. They're going to try to handcuff you. And if you, if you pull a gun to...
So the problem with the scenario that you set up, Credible2, is that the only way that they would shoot you is if you pulled a gun on them. And most citizens aren't going to pull a gun on the cops. They're too smart for that. And regardless if you evaded your taxes or not, if you pull a gun on the cops, they're going to shoot you. So one isn't really related to the other, is it? It's a nice scenario that you've set up, and it sounds good on the surface, but really when you break it down, when you deconstruct it and analyze it, you realize that it doesn't really make sense. So, no, they do not put a gun to your head to pay your taxes. Although, they are going to insist that you pay them, and you probably will go to jail if you don't, because let's face it, if you take advantage of the programs in this country and then you don't pay for them, that's kind of like stealing. So, and regardless if you want to admit it or not, you take advantage of those programs. I mean, chances are you went to public schools, you also probably drive, and so you take advantage of the fact that the roads are covered by laws and stuff that are governed to make sure that people don't speed or run into you and stuff like that. If we didn't have government, people would run all over you. People who had more advantages, basically people who had the most money and the most power would rule everything, and everybody else would have nothing. At least with the government that we have right now, we can vote. But if there was anarchy, somebody would end up taking over anyways, and we wouldn't like it very much. Now, that's not true. Your taxes are your citizenship in this country. If you don't want to be a citizen of this country, leave.
Citizenship means nothing. Just because I was born on a piece of land and found out that...
It's actually not just because you were born on a piece of land. It's because this is a government, and the government needs money from its citizens in order to run the programs that protect you and help you. Now, you might not take advantage of all those programs, but you do take advantage of some, and therefore should pay taxes to the government. Now, it's not just because you were born here. But if you don't want to take advantage of the government, then go and form your own government.
Some entity or a couple group of individuals pretty much own the land. Does that mean anything to me? No. Just because a certain group of individuals are taking away my liberties and always power hungry, does that mean anything?
You talk about certain individuals taking away your liberties, but in this type of scenario you set up with no government, there'd be a lot of individuals taking away your liberties. You'd have to preoccupy yourself with protecting yourself, because in a situation with no government, anybody who had more money or more power than you was able to have advantages over you, could take advantage of you, and there'd be nobody there to protect you. Now, of course, a lot of people believe in autonomy, that one should protect oneself, but let's face it, not everybody is capable of protecting themselves, and I think you'd probably be one of those people, because I don't think you have an artillery somewhere with guns, nor do you have a militia, and so somebody would end up taking away all your rights, if not killing you. You probably have a lot less than you do right now.
To me? No. And you say for me to move? Well, what do you mean want me to move? You pretty much say, well, if I move to another state, they're still going to be doing extortion. And they're
I'm not sure where you got the whole move to another state thing. I gave you a perfectly doable scenario where you and 3,300 people could get together and form your own nation on a really big island off the coast of Brazil. That was my suggestion for moving. So I'm not sure where the whole move to another state thing came from. I did suggest that, the United States, when it comes to the spectrum of taxes in the civilized world, that we have less taxes than other people, and therefore you might be better off staying where you are, because at least our taxes are less of a burden on the people. But you didn't seem to like that scenario, because you don't think you should have to pay anything to an entity to protect you. You seem to think that you don't need the protection. And if so, I invited you to move to a place where there is no protection. For example, the island. You can go to buyyourowisland.com or something like that. I'll post a link in the sidebar to the website that I went to. But that island is for sale, and it's an actual scenario that I went and found for you, so that you and those other 3,300 people could get together and purchase an island and start your own nation. And you can have it autonomous if you want, with no rules or anything like that. But I can assure you that wouldn't go well. Speaking of my island scenario, since you don't personally mention it, but some of the people in the comments did, I wanted to answer some of those. So there's a lot of people who suggested that a militia to protect the whole island country idea could be on a voluntary basis, and people could volunteer to be in a militia. I don't know anybody who would volunteer, without getting some kind of reward or payment or something like that. I personally wouldn't. And I don't know many people who would. I don't think you'd get that many volunteers to do something like that. The whole idea of relying on people to just do things, well, we don't live in Star Trek universe where people do things for the goodness of their health instead of for on a monetary basis. I don't think a society like that's going to work. People want tit for tat. They want to know that their work, their energy is going to manifest to something. And, it's not enough to just, protect it for the good of the people. People want something personal for their reward, and normally that comes on a monetary basis or some other type of thing like land or something like that. Even in the Crusades, which was a religious war, people are supposed to be doing it for God. Still, the church and the governments got together and said, okay, any land that you take, you get these spoils of war and stuff like that. So the whole idea that people would go and just volunteer for something without getting anything in return, I found kind of ridiculous.
I'm going to be doing murder. And I'm not going to be moving as a hermit. Come on, I'm not going to be doing that.
So you don't want to live as a hermit, but you don't want to pay taxes. Well, I'm sorry. You can't just have everything you want in life, everything the way that you want it. If you want to live in a civilized society, you're going to have to pay your taxes like everyone else. If you don't want to live in a civilized society and you don't want to pay your taxes, then by all means go live as a hermit somewhere. But those are your choices. There is no third choice, and there never will be. And the whole idea of some kind of utopian idea of anarchy where everyone works together is absolutely ridiculous. Because let's face it, there's a lot of bad people in the world, and there always will be, who will try to take advantage of you. There's people who are predators and people who are prey. But as humans, we want to take care of everybody, and we want to make sure that because we know that we ourselves could be predators or prey, that if we're prey, that we have somebody who's there to help us, and that would be the government. So if you want to live in a civilized society and not be a hermit, like you said, you don't want to be a hermit, then you're going to have to pay your taxes. I'm sorry.
What I'm going to be doing is separating myself from the government, trying to evade as many taxes as I can. Set up voluntary associations, charities, help with that. Do whatever I can to, undermine the government,
With all the effort you'd spend doing all that, wouldn't it just be easier to pay your taxes?
Yeah, it's nice that they have the lowest tax rate, or one of the lowest tax rate, or whatever, but it's still extortion.
I think you're a little confused under what extortion is. Extortion is something usually that crime groups do when they come in and kind of muscle people to give them money, but they don't give anything in return for the money. You're getting something for your taxes, lots of things for your taxes. So the whole idea that taxes are extortion isn't really an accurate term, because you don't get anything from the money that's extorted from you. Yes, you're required to pay taxes, but you also get things in return. So it's tit for tat. You're required to pay your light bill if you want light too.
Okay, don't give me that BS that X cannot be provided without taxes. Everything that you mentioned can't be provided without taxes. The only problem today is that many of the things that you mentioned are either heavily regulated or there's a government monopoly on these things.
I would sure hope that things like the fire department, the police department, and our bridge builders have high levels of regulations. Because if they didn't, if we had no levels of regulations, things like guys raiding drug dealers' houses and ended up playing Wii in the living room would be, standard fare. You cannot just expect people to do what they're going to do, because people have a nature to deviate from what they're supposed to do. And, when you've got no regulations to do things, all the buildings look like the Leaning Tower of Pisa. You need to have regulations. If you don't have regulations, then things aren't going to get done right. And I personally want the government to do those things so that we can get them done right. Does the government always do them right? No, but I personally think that the government would do a better job at doing things like making sure that the roads are regulated, making sure that the police department and the fire department are operating properly, better than private organizations who are just out for a buck and are going to do it as cheaply as possible, with the cheapest labor as possible, and try to make money off of it. I'm sorry, but I don't like that scenario. I think that that a public organization is much better, because the people have choices and can complain about things if they're not working right. If it was done by a private organization, you don't have that right to complain.
But don't think that without taxes, everything's just going to be chaos and nothing's going to be provided. If there's enough demand for roads, there's going to be roads.
Here's the problem with your scenario. You're talking about private organizations taking over for the government, what the government's doing right now. Well, private organizations are going to do it for money. They're going to try to make as much money off it as possible. So if private citizens have to pay private organizations to make their roads, they're probably going to end up paying a lot more to get it done. Now, you might suggest that, for example, a competition from one group to another would be able to get that done. But let's face it, there's not going to be competition for every organization. A lot of times, especially when there's no government regulation, monopolies are going to take over. just like they did before the government regulation came in with antitrust laws. So, when you have one organization which is a monopoly on the entire area, they're going to charge whatever they want to get those roads done to get you protected. So instead of paying the government to do it, where you can vote and complain and have some kind of choice on how things are done, private organizations, which don't have to answer to anybody, would get those done, and they'd probably charge you more, and they do shoddier work, and you wouldn't be able to say anything about it.
What shouldn't I have to pay for that the government provides? Everything, 100% everything. I shouldn't have to pay for involuntary defense, involuntary police forces, fire services, roads, everything like that. I believe everything should be provided voluntarily by society, by individuals. Every single thing, to the last bit.
So you think that if private organizations take over for the roads and the protection, that you're not going to have to pay for it? Oh, yes, you will. I'll give you a scenario. In the city of Chicago, they sold all the parking meters to a private organization, which then upped the fees so that they were $3 each to park. If we had no regulations, someone could simply take over and own all the roads, and then you would have to pay $3 an hour to use them, or even more if there was no regulation. So the idea that you're not going to have to pay for something like that, absolutely ridiculous. When private organizations take over, fees go up.
The government less power. The government will probably not listen to you. The politicians that you vote in use, rhetoric that makes them you vote for them.
The government will probably not listen to you. So I take it you've never tried. Because, if you're just saying probably this or maybe that, then I would assume that you have no real life experience in talking to a government official. I've had lots of experience talking to government officials, and I've had my questions answered. I've had people listen to my suggestions, and I've had them act on them. So the whole idea that you can't change the system is ridiculous. You yourself are not taking control of the power you have over your government. So the whole idea that you can sit here and complain about paying your taxes is ridiculous, because you're not doing anything to enact the programs that you want to enact, and not enact the programs that you don't want to enact. So you're just complaining about it on YouTube and not doing anything about it.
And then they get into office, and they can do whatever they want. They don't really listen to the people.
I am not going to suggest that there is not corruption within our government. I'm from Illinois, but the whole idea that the whole system itself needs to be thrown out and start over again, I don't agree with that. I think that we need to have stronger laws against corruption. I think that the people need to wake up and pay attention to who they're voting for, instead of listening to the sound bites. Well, we didn't get that close, but we kind of got close to having Sarah Palin as our vice president. And look what kind of a dingbat she is. Just because people liked her because she was a woman and because she was a conservative Christian Republican. Those are the only things they really knew about her. They didn't know who she really was, or what she'd done. But the thing is that the problem with our government is the people. George Carlin, I don't know the exact quote, but he said basically that the government is good as the people who vote for it, and, that the public sucks. So, the reason that we have problems within our government is because of people like you that don't do anything about it.
Maybe somewhat listen to the people, but their main goal is to increase the power of themselves. You can see that definitely. The politicians have definitely increased their power 10-fold, 100-fold, since, the United States of America started, If you want to give the government less power, it's useless to change the system from within. What you gotta do is do stuff through direct means to, change the system.
Direct means? Are you talking about some kind of hostile takeover? What exactly are you suggesting there? Because we, the people, control the government. We're the ones that vote them in. We're the ones that, they're employed by us.
Now, like I said, the politicians are voted in by us. But do you think they're gonna really listen to us. Politicians are the biggest liars. They're always power hungry. They have deceived a lot of people, and they have made the government more and more powerful.
Do you know who personally I think is worse than politicians? CEOs, people who run private organizations, people who ran Enron, people who run, Goldman Sachs, the people who run, AIG. Those are bad people that we should not have to rely on.
I'll tell you what you can personally do. There's one option. You can move to an island, and I'm betting you have enough time and enough resources to gather 3,300 people, who are pagans and who are socialists. And why don't y'all go to an island? Because if we go to an island that's just pagan and socialist, everybody's just going to care about each other. And, no one's going to be persecuting each other. Another option is that we go to a country that has more socialism, who's more accepting of pagans. Places that have more welfare, places that has universal health care, places like that care more about the poor. How do you move to some place like that?
As for taking 3,300 pagans and moving to an island, that's the great thing about this nation is that we have the right to practice our religion. And so I have no problem paying my taxes and doing things like that. As for moving to a socialist country, I'd love to. In fact, we've suggested to each other many times that after we get done with all the college that we want to do, that we'll try to emigrate to France. It's not that easy to do, but I have family that go there quite often, and I speak a little bit. And I've been there before, and it's very nice. And they do have a great universal healthcare program. There's also Germany, which has a great universal healthcare program, takes care of their citizens. And these countries aren't really, they have social democracies, basically. Which is, I guess I could consider myself to be a social democrat. I still believe in a democratic system. I don't believe in a communistic state of government, but I do believe in, providing for the people. And I think that the people should be provided for by their government, especially, when it comes to healthcare. Healthcare is a big issue for me. I think that, a right to life means right to health. So, I would love to move to France, and I'm in the midst of preparing to do so.
Immoral and uncivilized, where everything is done voluntarily, aka through the free markets, any relationships, anything done voluntarily. That's where we have this civilization.
I'm sorry, but your scenario just doesn't hold water. Because if things were done voluntarily by private organizations, you'd end up paying more for them and you'd have less control over how they do them. So the whole idea that they'd be somehow more moral just doesn't make any sense to me. You're going to have to try to critically analyze that statement and show me how it is that the way the government does things is less moral than the way a private organization would do it. Anyway, that's about the end of your video, and my video's gotten really long, so I apologize for the length, but I wanted to comment in detail to everything that you'd said, and I commented on some of the other things that people have said as well. I stick to my point, and I think that I have explained myself quite well on why it is I think that taxation is a necessary evil. Now, does that mean that the government itself is immoral? No. But that nobody likes paying taxes, but yet we have to do that if we want a civilized society. I myself would not want to live in a society where everything is privatized, because we'd have no control over how things are done. Like I said, without any laws to regulate antitrust, one organization would probably take it over. I personally don't want that, and I don't think most people do. I think people have realized that when government steps back and lets things take care of themselves, bad things happen. That's why the stock market was in such trouble at the end of 2008, because regulations were taken away from businesses and bad things happened. Anyway, if you have any other comments to make, I'll be glad to accept your video. Thank you for your patience, and blessed be.